Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And today I'm doing a book tag. I don't even remember the last time I did a book tag. It's been a long time, and I was so kindly tagged by Beatrice over at Confessions of a Penny Bookaholic. And she tagged me in the Trope tag. And this seemed like a pretty simple, easy one. You know me, I'm not a quick talker, so I'm sure I'll still manage to make it longer than normal, but it only has 6 questions, and I do have a couple books maybe for each one. But let's go ahead and dive into this. So the first question is, name a book that you heard great things about and expected to love, but you didn't. So for this one, there's 2 things. One, I don't always go with the hype. In fact, I usually run from it, and it ends up taking me a lot longer to read a book that other people do because I'm a snob like that. I like to be the first one to find books, which is lame and stupid. But I ended up reading Uprooted because it was picked by my viewers. Man, I think it was at the beginning of this year that we read Uprooted, and I was already starting to get some hints that I might not like it, but then I got into it, and number 1, I was pretty bored, and then number 2, I really disliked who was supposed to be our hero. I don't mind captor-captive situations. I don't mind a hate to love, but he was just a bit beyond what's acceptable to me for what the situation was, if that makes sense. Like, captor-captives, I have really specific qualifications for it. And of course, that's not what this one is. Like, it's a fairy tale retelling. It's kind of like Rumpelstiltskin or a Beauty and the Beast situation, and I just wasn't into it. So I did have some inklings that I might not like it, but also the people that didn't like it, they didn't like it because of the romance, and they're not romance readers. So I was like, ooh, maybe this could be a fantasy romance and I would really like it. And it just didn't do it for me. It didn't do it for me. Question number 2, name a series where you can't pick a favorite. Well, this was impossible to pick which series to do it for. So I ended up picking 2 of them from this year. So the first series where it's hard to pick a favorite for me is the Mackenzie series by Jennifer Ashley. So I think most people will tell you their favorite is The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie. And I will say it's very good. It's very good. But the further I went into the series, I loved some of the books, if not equally I loved them equally the same. So then there is Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage, which was a beautiful marriage in trouble relationship. And I loved Mac and Isabella, and their problems were just so real, and they just made me so happy. I love them. And then there was The Duke's Perfect Wife, which is about the oldest Mackenzie brother who is trying to run for prime minister, and he is being blackmailed with boudoir photos that he had taken with his mistress, and his ex-fiance comes to try to save him from scandal. And I loved their relationship. This whole book, it used to be called the Highland Pleasure series before it was like renamed to the Mackenzie McBride series. But these are very sensual historical romances. They are sweet, delectable, delicious. All of these Mackenzie brothers know how to have a good time, and I would always cry in each one and laugh in each one and swoon in each one. And these 3 are my favorite in the series, but I've read the first 8, and 6 out of the 8 were 5 stars for me. They were really good. Then the other series, which I think will come at no surprise to you as being one of my favorites, is IAD. So I just grabbed 3 of them. But man, I rated all of these 5 stars except for the novella I read. They were so good. Obviously, I have the first one. I think it's such a great start off to a series. I think that it has camp, it has danger, it has fun, it's sexy, it has the alpha males I like, it has powerful women. I just love this, love the start to this series. I love werewolves and vampires, and I love this series. So I really loved this one. This is the first book. I've had a lot of my friends who've started this because of me. Number one, you won't regret it. Number two, make sure you start with A Hunger Like No Other. Goodreads will lie to you. It tells you that the first one is the novella. Don't read the novella first. The people who have started this series because of me, but they started with the novella, they're like, Jen, I don't get what you like about this series. And I'm like, that's because you started with the novella. Don't start there. That's too much information to try to fit in one little book. You got to start with the beginning. And I always suggest with big series like this to read them in publication order, because the author may have wrote a prequel later on, but this is where their story starts. A prequel doesn't necessarily come first, right? It is to be read after you have other information, and then a prequel helps fill in information for you, right? So start with the first book. Don't listen to Goodreads. Sorry that was a rant. But anyway, this one is important to be on the list because I feel like it does start the series off really well, even if the dynamic between the leads isn't my favorite one in the series. Then there's Lothair, which people either love or hate him. I mean, you're supposed to hate him, but I also love him. I love Elizabeth. I think she tries to give as good as she gets. I mean, she has a lot of bad stuff happen to her, but she never like dims her spirit or gives up hope. And she is ready to challenge like one of the top 5 most powerful beings in the IAD universe to fight for her life. And I love her. I love the dynamic in this series, or in this book. And it's so sexy. Oh my God, I love it so much. It's so good. And then Sweet Ruin, which is one of the newest ones in the series, is freaking fantastic. It's so good. Yeah, Josephine and Ruin just, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, so that series and the Mackenzie series, I would say it's hard for me to pick a favorite book. They're amazing. Question number 3. Name a book that has a pretty cover but was boring as hell. So this was super easy for me to do. In fact, I own the entire series because they're beautiful but boring as hell. That is the Twisted Tale series by like Disney Publishing, Disney Press. They're, retellings of fairy tales where either like they'll all ask a question like, what if Sleeping Beauty never woke up? And they all have these gorgeous covers. I have them all behind me. But I've tried reading 3 of them and I've DNF'd them all because I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're afraid to change the story. I don't know. But then some of my viewers have really liked them. I wonder if I've just aged out of them because they're not the darkness that I want from a retelling. They're still YA. And I think that I've just grown out of YA fantasy romance like this. I really need more adult stuff in it. Like if it's going to be a YA fantasy, there needs to be other things going on. And this one just like, this series just doesn't do it for me, but I keep them because they're so pretty. And I own them all. Question number 4. Name a book that gave you a book hangover. So first off, I'll say a little something because I had someone ask this question on another video. And they're like, how do I not get book hangover? So I don't really get them because the way that I read is full steam ahead. I started doing this when I started Booktube, and it's just kind of got progressively like accelerated with COVID and with never leaving my home and stuff like that. But if I finish a book, or when I finish a book, even if it's at 2 in the morning and I gotta get up, I always start another one, even if it's just a couple pages, so that I don't wallow over another book, right? That still doesn't mean that my feelings don't feel it, and that that book that I read right after that book is probably not going to be a favorite unless it's, amazing, because it's having to compete with the book that I just finished. But I don't let myself dwell. That's why people ask all the time, how do you read so much? Well, I'm always reading, and I never let myself get in slumps anymore. I haven't had a slump in almost 2 straight years. I've never gone a day since then without reading something. So just think of that. That is why I have such very high book numbers, is because I always have a book going on my phone, on my Kindle, on Audible, or like physically. I always am in the middle of a book. However, I'll mention 2 books that I read this year that kept me thinking about them, and I pushed them on other people constantly. You can probably guess a couple of them. So the first one I want to talk about is Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. This book was so many things that I love in one. It was like it was custom made for me. A couple of the things I can't tell you what they are, because if you haven't read this book, they're major spoilers. I was telling this with my friend Bree, who just read this book because she was hyped up by what I said about it. But there's a pretty big secret that can't be told until you read it. But the things that I love, this has a heroine who is a pirate. She has a pirate husband, and she gets captured by a pirate hunter and is being taken back to England to be hung for her crimes. And so because she's a female pirate, this captor, this Commodore Ashley, he keeps her in his cabin to protect her from the prisoners in the hold as well as his crew. So she knows the only way she's going to survive is if she's willing to use her body and her mind to intrigue Ashley enough to not kill her. So yeah, this is amazing. It has the historical romance aspect. It has a hate to love romance. It has really, really sexy scenes. There's some dubious consent in here. There is some pretty graphic violence. There is triggers for rape and assault. But this book, when I got done with it, I immediately ordered the paperback. And when the paperback came, I immediately read it again. And I'm still going to read it again soon and annotate it this time, because that's a goal I've been making with myself, is if I want to reread a book, I need to be annotating it so that I'm not wasting my time. Another book from this year is A Heart of Blood and Ashes. When I grabbed all my books, I forgot to grab that one. This is a fantasy romance. This book is so good as well. This is a barbarian fantasy. It is also, so there's dragons and zombie-like creatures and sentient animals in some cases. There is different kingdoms who are trying to take over, and then there is this hate to love marriage of convenience between a woman who has nothing else to lose and a man who's lost almost everything. And it's so raw and amazing. And it's funny because, like, Fated Mates, they're going to do a deep dive on this book, and I'm so excited about it because I actually read it because Sarah McLean read it and explained a scene in it, and I was like, oh, I'm into it. But then the characters kiss for the first time on like page 400. That does not mean they haven't been doing other things before then. But I was like, wow, that's true. This couple has not kissed on the lips until page 400 of this book. And it was so intense. It was a perfect amount of everything I want. It was a perfect amount of fantasy and world building, and it was a perfect amount of character building and relationship. Like, they were equally balanced, they were equally present and developed and amazing. And this series, I know, is going to be one of my favorite series when it's finished. Like, it's amazing. And then one other one, which just happens to be sitting in front of me, which I have been screeching about, which will be out, I believe it comes out the day that I'm releasing this video, is The Takeover by T.L. Swan. This book is a contemporary romance. It is a widow with 3 sons and a billionaire who, they have some business dealings with each other, and then they both end up at a conference and have a one-night stand, which turns into a weekend fling, which turns into an obsession for both of them, where she has responsibilities and he is willing to do whatever he has to woo her. And it's beautiful. And I'm actually going to also be reading this one and annotating it very soon. because I just got my copy in the mail yesterday. And I can't wait. It's so good. It's so good. All right. Question 5. Name a book that took a while to get into, but you ended up liking. So I have 2 for this one. The first one, I don't have my copy with me because my friend is borrowing it, but that's actually Renegades by Marissa Meyer. So I love her Lunar Chronicles. I think it's adorable. I love fairy tale retellings. I love magic and sci-fi, and I love Cinder and the Rampion Gang, and I love them. But Renegades is a sci-fi like superhero story, and we have a heroine that starts out really unlikable because we don't know her full story, and the hero feels so much more likable. And not just because he fights for the heroes and she fights for the villains. Like, we don't fully understand her motivations for, you know, like, and even the motivations I understood, I'm like, these are misguided, and it's very clear that they're misguided. And it took a long time before the Shades of Grey came out to me. It was very clear to me that, like, I see why you want revenge, but it's for a very misguided reason why you're doing it. But I ended up really loving the trilogy. It's not overly romantic. These are like 16 and 17-year-olds, but I thought the powers everyone had was cool. I thought it was really fun, and I feel like it's a really good for both boys and girls. Like, I could see middle school boys liking this as well. I think she did a good job keeping the cover pretty like neutral. It's got that red, white, and blue, silver, black on it. And I think that boys would enjoy it too. But that book did take me a while to get into. And in fact, all 3 books in the series, the beginning was a little bit of like, she had a very slow moving plot. However, in context of the story, once you know the whole thing, it makes sense why the main character took her time building up to what she was doing, because she couldn't just make that decision that quick. Like, it needed time to build up. The next one, which I read, I believe it was my first book of the year, was A Kingdom of Dreams by Judith McNaught. I just got this copy. This is one of the originals. I don't think it's the very first printing. This one is from 1989, so it might be. I've been collecting like all the editions of this one. This book is basically like a classic historical romance at this point. This is about Jennifer Merrick and Royce Westmoreland. I'm really excited to continue this series, by the way, but this one was a little hard to get into just because of the writing style of it. I hadn't read a historical romance from the 80s before. I don't think so, because the authors I love, they were all like they were 90s authors. So this was the oldest one I'd read at the time. I've since read older ones than this. And the writing style just took a little bit to get into. In the beginning of this book, Jennifer, we start with her wedding to Royce, and they both hate each other. And she's praying to God, like literally praying to God, that anything would happen to stop this wedding from happening. And God is answering her. So it was a very, like, I was intrigued, but it was very strange. But yeah, like, she was praying and he was answering her. And I liked that because my name is Jennifer. And so it literally says, like, God saying, Jennifer, listen to me. And so it was kind of interesting for that. But it did take a while, because first we're seeing this wedding and then we backtrack quite a ways. And there's a lot of things about Jennifer that are just ridiculous. And I'm just like, woman, what are you doing? You're messing things up. And it takes a while for her to get her stride, which is okay because she's 17 and considered an old maid, because this is like early Renaissance period, okay? So anyway, it took a while to get into, but by that, I mean a couple of hours, because I read this in a day, but I was, you know, that's the thing with me. It's hard. This question's hard because if I don't get into a book by a certain point, I'm usually DNFing it and moving on, but I pushed through that one because it was a book club read, and I'm glad that I did. And then the final question, see, I told you I'd make this last a long time. The final question is, tell us your favorite and least favorite tropes. So, all right. I am a believer that any trope can be done well, but the way I split this up is ones that I'm less likely to instantly buy the book because of the trope, it'll take like someone else's recommendation to try it, or I've heard other things about the book, or I've seen it done wrong more than I've seen it done right. And I mean, the same goes for my favorite tropes when I get to those. I've seen them done right more often than I've seen them done wrong. So with the ones that are my least favorite, I have two actually. I'm not a huge fan of friends to lovers, specifically if either A, they grew up together their whole lives and one of them was in love with the other the whole time. I really don't like that one because I don't like pining. I'm more inclined to go for it if the guy was doing the pining because I think that's sweet. But I really, really, really don't like a heroine who's been pining over a man for that amount of time because it makes me feel bad for her. And also, it's a bit too real because I've done it myself. Again, exception to every rule. Totally true. The other is I don't like secret babies. I am kind of a fan of surprise babies because I like that if there's like a one night stand and someone gets pregnant or whatever and they are together the whole time. Like the baby is a surprise and it like keeps them together and then they grow to love each other. I like that. But I don't like secret babies, as in we had a one night stand in college and I never told you about it. Not if she couldn't get in contact with him, because sometimes that happens. There's a one night stand where you didn't share information with each other or that person like, you know, there's a reason why. Like I've read, there's one by T.L. Swan where they have a weekend together and then, but she didn't give him her real name. So she's not able to get in contact with him until she runs into him later. Like that's different. But literally secret baby because you either like wanted to break up with that person so you didn't tell them. They were moving, they were joining the military, they were going to marry somebody else and you never tell them. And then 5, 10, 15 years later, you tell. And I just hate that. I hate that. I've only seen it done where I liked it a couple times. And it usually more has the elements of I couldn't get in contact with you. I hate the, like I was bribed not to tell you or somebody threatened me away from you because it just shows like such, it just frustrates me because I think that both people have equal rights to someone. And if you didn't even ask them, or like a guy said, he said in a time like, oh, I'm not ready for kids. And you assume that means that if you're pregnant and it's his baby, that he won't want it, right? That just flusters me so much that I get really pissed at the woman for doing it. And I don't want to be mad at the heroine of the book. Like, I don't want to because I know she has her reasons, but it is not a good enough reason for me if you didn't have extenuating circumstances. Like if it wasn't because that person was literally evil, like let's say that person is literally evil, or you didn't have their contact information. Anything else, whether someone else scared them away from them, they didn't think that person wanted a kid, any of those things, I'm just not here for it because I think that's a shitty reason to not give your child both parents that you didn't even ask. So that was a rant, but yes, I like surprise babies, but I don't like secret babies. I have a big problem with those. My favorite though, let's talk about things that I do like. So in case you didn't know, I really like age gap and I pretty much like every variation of this. I have yet to find a version of an age gap that I'm not willing to give a try to or like. And honestly, I could make age gap recommended. I read an age gap at least every week, if not all the time I'm reading them. I like if it is older man, younger woman. I'm getting into older woman, younger man. I like student teacher. I like dad's best friend. I like best friend's dad. I like every version of it. I want it. I love it. I like it. Give me some more of it. Age gap is my favorite. It's so good. I love the taboo nature of it. I love that it's usually a secret. I love that it's usually super hot. That is just my favorite. Another one that I really like, so I do like one night stands who catch feeling. Obviously, the takeover. I really, really love that. I like when it's a one night stand and then they just can't stop seeing the other person. Because I think that's realistic too. Like a really close person in my life their beautiful marriage and family started from a one-night stand that just never ended. And so that has a soft spot in my heart, especially when like the guy is a playboy and he does a one-night stands all the time, and the girl maybe doesn't do one-night stands that often, or she's just getting over a relationship and wants a one-night stand, and then they have it, and the guy's like, I have to have this person in my life. Like, that's just catnip for me. And then the other one is I really like sex packs, whether this is like friends with benefits, or I'm going to teach you something about sex, or we have a finite amount of time that we're going to be having sex. I really like those because, again, it's all of that, like, we're going to keep this unemotional, but it's very hard to keep long-term sex unemotional, at least in romance land. Like, you're not supposed to, or it wouldn't be a romance, but I really like those. So there you go. I managed to make this trope talk nice and long. I'm planning to tag Izzy from Happy For Now, Nayema over at her channel, Sarah from Steeped in Books, Becca from Becca's Book Club, and Chloe from Always Booked. So I'm going to tag those ladies down below. Yeah, I will also try to find who the original person was for this, and I'll put that video down below. And yeah, thanks for watching. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week, and you can watch some more of them right now. Bye!